fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. This is actually part two of a show that we started with the senior role players that are good fits for the Seahawks. We went through the defensive list, and then Keith called me out on the time, and we decided to do two shows out of it. So welcome back, Keith. It's literally 10 minutes later for us. It could be 3 days later for folks listening to the show, but welcome back in.
If you missed that show, you really should go listen to it. Bill had a ton of research and information on defensive players. It's worth the time to go listen. And that isn't a joke. I'm not trying to get Bill to laugh at me. That's legit. You guys, it's worth a listen. So take the time to go do that.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. I should buy you a coffee mug or something.
You should.
For that comment.
Or fill up my glass one of these days.
Here's a 20 or two. Yeah, fill your glass up. I would totally do that if we were in person.
So let's start at tight end. One, because I know you said you wanted to when we were pre-show, and two, because it actually is a need for Seattle, because two of the three tight ends on the roster are both free agents.
Yeah. So what's going to happen to Gerald Everett and Will Disley?
We don't know.
Team probably has a plan. Obviously they've got plan A, plan B, plan C on this. I think the team would love to have both back. I think probable is going to be the right word when we say they'll probably be back. We just don't know for sure. Colby Parkinson's the guy. He doesn't have hardly any use on the team so far, but he's got a lot of upside. In fact, upside is a kind of a pun for him because he's 6'7". But that's all we've got. We don't have any practice squad guys. Nobody's signed to a future contract. It's kind of wide open right now. And so out of the Senior Bowl, there were a few prospects that I thought were worthy. There wasn't a ton. I don't have a tremendous amount of information on everyone, but I thought there were a few that stood out. I know that you really like Trey Mcbride, Keith.
I do. I thought he looked really good last week. I think just as a guy, as an athlete, he is probably the best of the group. Is he a great inline blocker at this moment? No, but he has all the reason. You have all the reason to think that with coaching he will become one. He just was never asked to. But his ability to catch the ball with really soft hands and have a big catch radius and catch the ball through contact is simply why I think he was going to have a very long NFL career. I have
a question for you. Who was the guy that Seattle had a couple of years ago in kind of a receiving tight end kind of guy? The guy he used to be with New England, and then he came over.
Oh my God, I can picture his face.
I know. I can't
Jimmy Graham.
Not Jimmy Graham. Not Jimmy Graham. No. The other guy. He was originally undrafted, a 7th round guy. We threw him a 7th round pick for him. He came in. He was real productive his first year. He had 49 catches. Then he was less productive prior to last year, and then he was off the roster. Started with an H, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like Health. No, it's not Health.
So anyway, it's Trey Mcbride kind of reminds me of him, and I'll tell you why. I really like Trey Mcbride. He's an ultra productive receiving threat the last 2 years. In 2021, he had 90 receptions, 1,121 yards, super athletics, strong, fast enough, absolute killer blocker, at least very willing, and a total terror as a receiver and put up jaw-dropping numbers. I mean, really. But for me, it's weird because he's 6'4", 249, and runs a 4.65 40, and he has 32 and 5/8 arms with a 78-inch wingspan. The reason I say that is because he's not terribly long. He's 6'4", 249. He's not going to be that red zone target that a lot of tight ends are as move tight ends. He's also not your inline blocker guy because he's, while he may be willing, and in college he was successful at it, in the pros, you're going to want that length to be able to kind of disengage and keep blockers away from you. And so for me, I'm not quite as high on him as everyone else. I think for me, he's been replaced as, I don't know, maybe a third or fourth option in this draft, I think, overall.
The guy you were thinking of was Jacob Hollister.
Jacob Hollister, yes.
And I think he's better than Hollister. I think that Hollister was a guy that wasn't particularly good at anything, but worked really hard.
I'll give him that much.
I think that when you look at a guy like McBride, he is got softer hands. He's more athletic.
He's a much more natural pass catcher, and yes, Hollister was pretty good.
He was. I think that McBride, what gets me thinking that he would be a good Seahawk. Actually, you're bringing up Hollister is not a bad thing because I hadn't thought of that, but it's his ability to catch through contact, his ability to be getting hit while the ball's arriving and still make the catch. And Hollister did a lot of that, which is why he got made a lot of first down catches, or catches for a first down during not this last, his last year with the team, but the year before when they were really shorthanded, and he became this guy that
he
Russell
only
Wilson
played in 10 games and had 49 receptions.
Yeah. So
that's quite productive for that guy.
I think McBride looks to me like a better version of that.
Interesting. Well, yeah. And the reason that I hesitate on him as well for the Seahawks is I don't think the Seahawks are going to use that pick on where McBride will likely go in this draft. And I think McBride, a lot of teams will fall in love with the productivity and so forth, and will look at him as a late first round, early second round option as being the first tight end off the board. Okay.
I don't think it's going that early.
I don't think so either, Keith, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of big boards out there that have him, anywhere from 29 to 40. And he's not there for me, but it doesn't mean he won't be there for some team in the NFL.
I was thinking early round 3 with him, which is part of the reason why I liked him is I thought in that range, his upside and the value of that pick would be great.
Yeah.
So
a couple of names just to throw out. Everyone's talking about Jeremy Ruckert as being the best all-around tight end in the draft. And what they mean by that is he's going to give you some upside on the receptions and being able to catch the ball and red zone targets and in traffic, but he's also going to be able to be a good inline blocker. He went to Ohio State. He wasn't heavily featured there at all. I think if he would have ended up going to, for example, Colorado State, where Trey McBride was, Jeremy Ruckert would have been an entirely different conversation, I think, right now, as being a real viable option. He had a quarterback rating when targeted of 132.2 or 134.2. I really like him. He doesn't have the speed, obviously. He's kind of a jack of all trades tight end. Another guy that really came on in the Senior Bowl, and I would be wouldn't be worth anything if I didn't mention him, is Greg Dolich out of UCLA at 6'4", 248, ran a 4.7 40. He's not going to be like your Trey McBride guy, but he's got better length at 34-inch arms, 82-inch wingspan. He was all over the place at the Senior Bowl and just getting rave reviews, all up and down. And I didn't hear that much from about Trey McBride, although during the game, Trey McBride had like 3 catches for 60 yards or something like that, and had some nice impact plays. I don't recall Greg Dolich having impact in that game at all. So,
okay, so I think a guy that we're kind of missing here is Daniel Bellinger out of San Diego State University, because he is.
I haven't even heard of that name.
Oh, good. Glad to know that I'm actually prepared.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's talk about him.
So he's a guy that, San Diego State University, not known as a guy or a school that's going to produce a lot of, big time inline blocking kind of players, but that's exactly who he is. He is, if Disley leaves, through free agency, Bellinger is a guy that can come in known as a fantastic blocker, practically a right tackle, instantly a guy that you can count on and depend on as a blocking tight end, which I know is not a skill set, which is highly sought after, and it's boring for most fans. I get that. But what we saw in mobile is a guy who had soft hands, looked pretty smooth running routes, could definitely be a guy that can get out into space and make some catches and be that like he's not going to stretch the field down the middle. You're not drafting a Jimmy Graham or a guy that
runs really a 4.7
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who's going to be an outlet for Wilson, but good blocking, get that 6-yard catch on 3rd and 5. And that kind of stuff. And you need guys like that.
The weird thing about a guy like that, A, he's a special teams player. B, he's left open a lot because of that speed. Nobody is going to be covering this guy. If all options are, off the table, he's going to be the last guy that's going to get covered and likely being able to be an outlet like that. Hey, I wanted to get back to Jeremy Ruckert really quick because I wrote this in my notes and I highlighted it just to make sure that I said it. He had a college career at Ohio State with 51 receptions, 590 yards. I mean, Trey McBride had 90 receptions, 1,121 yards
in 1 year.
In just 1 year. In high school, Ruckert had 3,100 receiving yards and 37 touchdowns. So the guy can catch the ball. He just didn't have that opportunity, I think, at Ohio State. Wide receivers, Keith. So I got a couple. There weren't a lot of. I know that I had some trouble a couple weeks ago talking about wide receivers in this class, and especially out of the Senior Bowl. And I went through this list again for this show, and now I know why. It was kind of like unremarkable in a sense. The guys they had at the Senior Bowl at the wide receiver position. There were a couple of standout guys though. Who do you got?
Christian Watson out of North Dakota State.
He's number one on my list to talk about.
6'4", 210. He's physical, fast, deep ball specialist. He basically is like you could draft him. He's out of a little tiny school like North Dakota State, so I don't think he's going to go early in the draft. And basically what you're doing is you're drafting a guy that if DK Metcalf gets hurt, you could have him go in there. He's not going to be as good, but he could replace a lot of that same stuff that we see with Metcalf.
I think he's a better route runner coming in.
Yeah, he might be, but he doesn't have the top end speed.
Well, he's 4.38 now. DK Metcalf's with a 4.32.
Okay, I didn't think he was that fast. I was thinking to picture him more about a 4.42. So
yeah, he's a 4.38 40. He's a little older at almost 23 years old. True. He was projected to be a 4th round pick prior to the Senior Bowl. He was Trey Lance's favorite target in 2020. Just FYI, he's one of the premier kick returners in all of college football at North Dakota State. North Dakota State is kind of interesting because they win the championship for the Division II, quite frequently. But he's a jet sweep guy. He's a legit deep threat, a 50-50 guy at 6'5". He's squarely in the 3rd round conversation now, Keith.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I think he would be. Can you imagine how
I can
put him on one side, Metcalf on the other, and lock it in the slot, and you can just
and the kid that we picked up last year,
Eskridge.
Yeah, nice.
And then you basically at that point you see opposing safeties just start to cry because there's
just a lot of speed right there too.
There's nothing you can do to that.
Yeah, true. So another guy is Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati. I thought would be a good Seahawky kind of player. 6'3", 210 pounds. Speaking of Christian Watson is kind of a DK Metcalf kind of a guy. DK Metcalf's going into the final year of his deal. Now, a lot of folks think, well, DK Metcalf's got a 5th-year option. No, he doesn't. He was drafted in the back of the 2nd round, right? So he's got 4 years. Next year is going to be the last year of his rookie deal. Seahawks, I'm sure, will do whatever they can to try to retain DK Metcalf, but it's going to cost a boatload of cash.
He's worth it.
So this would be the year that the Seahawks may look to the draft to possibly look at a hedge player. And Alec Pierce would fit that bill at 6'3", 210 pounds, runs a 4.39 40. He's very long, athletic, a really nice frame. He high points the ball really nice. He's got jumped an amazing 45 feet, 11 inches in the triple jump in high school. Bruce Feldman's got him on his athletic freak list of at 6'3", 213 pounds and deadlifts 675 pounds. He broad jumps 11 feet. And he's a vertical jump of over 40 inches, and the 4.45 in the 40 and the 4.14 in the short shuttle. So in fact, I would love to have a guy like Bruce Feldman on the podcast at some point, just to talk about these kind of guys, because there's nothing like a guy in the combine in his underwear that completely jumps out of the gym and does all these skill tests and stuff. It's kind of crazy to watch. Yeah, but he's going to be a guy that really tests well at the combine.
So a guy that I'm watching is Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. Okay, he didn't have the greatest week. He had he didn't start out well, but really showed off on day 3. Impressive hands, good roots, is a red zone threat, and just showed off some athleticism the cornerback struggled to be near. I think he's a guy that's probably going to be a day 3 pick, so like 5th or 6th round. But to me, he's a guy that I look at and I go, this is someone who could push for that wide receiver 4 job. And you've got your top 2 guys. Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
He's an interesting guy, Keith. I mean, I think that he would fit the bill as some sort of a weapon kind of a guy. I think I would feel more comfortable with this pick if he had better predicted speed. His predicted speed is 4.48. I think if he ran a 4.38, he'd be a little bit more interesting for me, because at 6 foot 193, he's got 29-inch arms and a 70 3/8 inch wingspan.
I know that's small.
So he's just a real small guy, very small guy. But he's quicker than he is straight line fast.
When you watch him, you don't see any Deebo Samuel in him.
Yeah, but Deebo just has a thicker lower frame to him, and this guy does not.
He does, but he kind of gives me that. Is he a long speed guy? I mean, he's not bad, but that's not his thing. He doesn't have the length to really do that. But he's a run after the catch guy. He's a Golden Tate style. Yes,
that is very true. That's where this guy's forte is, and kick returns, all that stuff.
Yeah, get him the ball, punt returns, kick returns, getting the ball like quickly, or line him up in the backfield, swing it to him out of the in the flat, and just let him use his run after the catch ability. I think he could be a lot of fun. I also think
you're not going to slot role, Yeah,
I also don't think you're going to give up a lot to get him. Like I said, I think he's like a 5th round pick.
Interesting. Nice. Let's talk about running backs.
Okay.
I like running backs. The Seahawks are in a kind of a pickle because we don't have a running back. Well, we do have a running back under contract in Chris Carson, who went through a neck surgery. We don't know for sure what his status is going to be. All indications are surgery was successful. Team is planning on having him back. I think, at least that's the word in the street, in February. We'll find out what happens later on, or if they decide to go in a different direction, solve the problem in free agency and the draft, and then Chris Carson could find himself on the bubble, with a $3 million cap savings or thereabouts. So we'll see. But I think it's nonetheless, regardless, Penny's on the open market. He could return and be back. But this is the year you would probably want to try to solve the running back problem long term with a younger prospect, and it seems like there's a few in this draft.
I got to say, right now, after this last year, and I feel weird saying this, I would rather have Penny back than Carson, and that's going to get Seahawks fans, especially Seahawks.
It's hard
Twitter,
to say that when Penny's missed so much time, but you know what? Let's be honest. Chris Carson's missed a lot of time too, and then the time he's been less effective because they've kind of metered him a little bit.
Yeah, he had a couple of really good years when he was healthy. They were good when he was healthy, but he wasn't always healthy. But the last 2 years have not been great. And Penny came on over the last 6 games and really looked like a star.
Well, yeah, he looked like he was the best in the NFL.
And
that's Jonathan Taylor level.
Yeah, he was a legit good running back.
You don't want to overpay a guy like that, though. You want to let the market kind of come to you. So he may have to go out the door, go test the market, and come back and take a $4 million 1-year prove-it deal, which I think is the most likely outcome for Penny. Go test the market. We'll have a deal on the table for you if you come back, but it's going to be a 1-year deal because you just can't invest a whole bunch of capital. Now, maybe you could. Maybe the Seahawks look at it and say, you know what? We'll give you a 2-year deal. Cap's going up next year. We'll figure it in, and we'll give you some security. But boy, that's tough as a fan to look at that and say, you missed 20, 25 games over your first 4 years in the games that you were. Well, in the games that he was available, he just didn't get enough touches to get rolling, less effective. The offensive line didn't perform well for him. And, it all stacks up to the position where I think it's unlikely that any team views him as their primary back out of free agency. I think it would be kind of foolhardy for a team to do that.
And I agree with you. I think that any team expecting him to be, running back 1, is going to look at those last 5 games and see, wow, that's amazing. But that means you're ignoring the previous 3.5 years where he barely played because he was always hurt. So, anyways, we're talking about a player on the roster, not a player in the Senior Bowl. One of the guys that I really liked, this week was Rashad White out of Arizona State. 6 foot 210. He's a little undersized for what Seattle likes as a between the tackles runner, but he looked explosive. He caught the ball effectively out of the backfield.
That's where his strength is at.
Showed off some patience as a runner. Where he was able to set up some blocks and give the offensive lineman a chance to engage in their blocks before making that cut. And that's not something you see a lot of from college running backs. They tend to outrun their blocking a little bit. And that kind of patience is, like I said, it's rare for a college running back, and it's something I like to see. So I thought he was a definite guy as a third down back possibility, but I saw enough from him to say, well, maybe he's a guy who's better than just a third down back. He could be an every
possible.
down back.
It is possible. We do have Dallas and Homer still on the roster. That would be my hesitation. He does have 4.46 speed. It's interesting, Keith, because his straight line speed after 40 yards is actually his strength. He can really break away from you when he gets rolling in open space. He was clocked at the Senior Bowl as running 22 miles an hour on GPS. And that's significant for a guy that runs 4.46. And when a guy runs 4.46 and does 22 miles an hour, he's gaining speed, the further away he gets. So that would be interesting. It's kind of an undervalued guy. I agree with that. I think, teams may look at him as being a third round guy. I think he's currently not ready to be the 3-down guy. And so I think that he's going to get pushed a little bit, maybe to the back end of the 3rd round, 4th round kind of a thing. And, and if he's there, he could be an option for Seattle, especially if they feel like they still need to address the running back position in the draft with somebody that gives them the potential to be an every down guy. Because you never know how a team views a guy. He may, Pete Carroll and company may view Rashad White as being a in between the tackles, 3-down running back all day long, and he just needs to add some functional strength, and boom, boom, he's right there. A guy that's already right there is Damien Pierce out of Florida, 5'10", 220 pounds, runs a 4.51 40, which is plenty fast for a guy that size, and he's a young prospect, just turned 21, had 6,779 yards and 92 touchdowns in high school, but had extremely low usage in college. His best year being last year with 517 yards a 5.9 average and 12 touchdowns. He also picked up 200 plus yards receiving as well. Again, Bruce Feldman, mentioning the Football Freaks list again, is number 21 on his list. Squats 705 pounds, benches 390, has a 37-inch vertical in the 4.5 40. That's crazy. I mean, he's just kind of one of those block looking running backs, short, squatty, big thighs. And the intangible things on him that I was hearing out of the Senior Bowl were kind of the marked things that I noticed, where he was being tagged with a leader, outspoken, people rallying around him, that sort of thing.
Which is interesting because given his athleticism and measurables and all of that, and then you see his lack of production in college, and the first thing that came to mind when I saw him was Christine Michael.
Yes.
Christian Michael, if you want to call him that. And I just like, okay, yeah, here's a guy with all of these like crazy athletic traits, but no production, because why did he struggle so hard to get on the field? And it wasn't injury.
It wasn't just 1 year either. It was all 4 years.
Exactly. And like I said, he was a Christian Michael. That was the comp that came to mind, and I just couldn't overcome it. And I have a hard time.
You're going to have to look into this.
I have a hard time looking at his tape and judging him fairly, because I just see Christian Michael over and over again, and I don't want the Seahawks to do that.
I know, right? How about Brian Robinson, Jr. out of Alabama? Had that great game against Cincinnati, where he had 200 plus yards. He looked unstoppable. Perfect size for the Seahawks at 6'1", 226, 4'4", or 4.51 40, which is plenty fast. He had decent production. He can catch the ball out of the backfield for you.
Since my problem here, since Saban took over in Alabama, one of the things we've noticed is that he runs his running backs into the ground. And there's very little tread left on those tires when they come into the NFL. And that's not to say everybody.
Did sit behind Najee Harris,
I know,
and a couple other backs, and really only had his senior year here to kind of, for production wise. So he does have some tread left.
So he does, but I just, there's something about Alabama running backs that it makes me leery. And I know that people are going to look at that and like, wait, Sean Alexander was that was pre-Saban, so it doesn't count.
Right. So I will say this about the running backs in the whole, is that for me, this was about it on the Senior Bowl running backs to talk about. There's a pretty sizable list of running backs available in this draft that's pretty deep. I thought, this would be a good time to pick up a running back up through about round 4, maybe even into round 5, depending on where you're trying to get your specialists, in that range. But Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller, Kenneth Walker right at the top. Kyron Williams, Brian Robinson, Damien Pierce, James Cook, Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong Jr. I mean, there's just a ton of guys. All those guys I just mentioned are probably going to go before the end of round 4.
So
maybe even round 3.
Question for you. Spiller in this draft or Javonte Williams in the last draft?
Yeah, I'm a big Javonte Williams guy. And
I know you
last
are.
year.
That's
and I'm still a Javonte Williams guy. I think he's just untapped almost.
But you look at Spiller.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
There's a ton of potential there. There's a guy that's going to
hard to deny what he's going to be.
Breece Hall is interesting because Breece Hall is actually a little faster, a little heavier, a little bigger, but he's a completely different style runner. Breece Hall is the kind of guy that's still going to run in between the tackles for you, but he's going to avoid contact a little bit more. Isaiah Spiller is going to come right after you. At 215, 6'1", runs a 4.49 40. Breece Hall runs a 4.39. I would take either one of those backs right now over, depending on Rashad Penny, or having Chris Carson come back. Those two guys, and Kenneth Walker. You can put Kenneth Walker in that if you want. Kenneth Walker's a little more undersized, but I think could potentially add another 5-6 pounds of muscle. But those guys at the top, they're going to be difference makers, I think. Now, the question is, at 41, where we picked this year, are you going to spend that 41st pick on a running back? Oh, my goodness, heads would roll on Seahawks Twitter, right? We have so many other needs, and there are some other running backs in this draft. But as we've seen with certain backs in this league, that they can be difference makers for you. Look at Cam Akers. He got hurt, but we know what kind of trajectory he was on before he got hurt. I think he's going to be back that same way next year. You look at Derrick Henry, others, Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller are going to be two guys that we're going to be talking about in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the offensive line because we're running short on time, and this is a spot where the Seahawks need help. And there's a guy that I really want to make sure we talk about, and that would be Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. And it's Northern Iowa, right? I mean, so you're talking tiny school, and you're like, is this a guy that you really want to? Do you really want to project a tiny school, Northern Iowa, as a potential star? Man, I don't know. The only reason
I didn't write him down on my list. And I obviously he's my favorite tackle in this draft, and I've said that a few different times. I didn't write him on the list because there's just no way now he's going to be there when Seahawks draft at 41. I just think
you're killing me with that statement because I want Trevor Penning in Seattle. I think his combination of size,
I don't think I'm wrong. I hope I am wrong, Keith.
Attitude is going to be really good at the next level. And I would love to have him in a Seahawks
offensive
uniform.
line. I mean, this is your deal. And if you tell me and convince me that this guy is going to go 41 to the Seahawks, I would be thrilled. Thrilled. I think, and everyone else would get on board too, right? Because there's flashy picks, and then there's picks that you just need to make. And if he was there, he would be the pick that the Seahawks just need to make, because then your left tackle problem for years would be solved, and cheaply for the first 4 years. A year ago, the Seahawks went wide receiver with a gadget player in the round 2 when their center of the future was sitting there, and they chose not to take the center, and they went with a flashy pick, it burned them all year, and it's going to burn them every year until they find themselves an elite center. If the possibility of getting a guy like Penning is there and they go in any other direction, they're gonna regret it. There will be long-term consequences for the Seahawks because it's going to affect their ability to compete long-term, because you didn't get that elite left tackle when they were sitting there ready for you. And I think that's who Trevor Penning is. And I know people are going to say like that's a hot take and whatever. I'm overselling a guy from Northern Iowa. I really like Trevor Penning in this draft. I'm just going out right now and I'm going to see what the consensus big board says about Trevor Penning.
So
just so that I can throw shade, he peaked at 19 overall, and he's currently listed at 25th pick. The idea of him dropping to Seattle is probably not likely. Let me give you an alternative option that may be there for the Seahawks, and maybe you could talk about it a little bit. Daniel Falalo of Minnesota is projected currently to go 38, and then Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan is currently going 40. Just speaking of running backs, the two running backs I just spoke of, Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller, are there at 41 and 42 in the consensus big board. Just throwing it out there.
So
Darian Mathis is, by the way, available in this spot, and Darian Kennard as well.
Yeah, I mean, I expect Kennard to be out of Kentucky. He's a guy who looked like he's going to be an elite guard.
Yes.
With the ability to play tackle at times, especially if
right tackle
or whatever, right tackle. But he doesn't look like a left tackle guy to me. Daniel Filafale, did I say that right? Falale?
You're better than me, probably.
Falale.
I didn't even write him down to talk about it on my list because I've already written him off.
Yeah, see, he's a guy he's like 6'8", 360. He's
383.
383.
383 at the Senior Bowl.
Oh my God, that's huge. He's a massive guy, huge, long arms. I mean, defensive.
He's a hamburger eating factory, is what he is.
Or he's a hamburger factory eating lineman.
Yes, true.
He's a guy.
Right?
Defensive ends are going to have a real hard time getting around him because of how long and big he is. And as a run blocker, he looks really good. I mean, Minnesota used him as a fullback. Can you imagine being a linebacker and having a 380-pound fullback running at you to block you? That's got to be scary. But honestly, he didn't look good over the week.
The defensive line
struggled
at the Senior Bowl really just pushed him all over the place, including on his back. So.
Yeah, he really struggled. So I think he to me was one of the bigger losers at the Senior Bowl. I think he drops quite a bit. I wouldn't mind Seattle taking a flyer on him, especially as a potential right tackle. But to do so,
if they did all the work, and he was their guy, and they saw things, they saw things that they could work with, especially inside at guard, his first year or move outside to right tackle. Great. I don't know that he's any better today than our current right tackle, Jake Curran.
Yeah, I actually kind of like Jake Curran in that role. I think, I get his pass blocking is not great, but as a run blocker, he was really good. He was a stabilizing presence. He didn't commit penalties. I liked him out there.
So let's finish up the conversation and talk about 3 or 4 other guys that you want to finish up with. Do you have Zion Johnson on your list to talk about?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he's a guy that I like personally, but I like him for his versatility and his ability to play essentially all 5 positions as a backup. I've looked around and there are places that say, no, as a guard, he's an elite guy. I don't fully see it, but I see a guy that can play center and do so better than, Ethan Posick, a guy who can play guard.
That's why I think that he would be interesting for the Seahawks, and the Seahawks would have him on their board. I think that's the key here. Would the Seahawks have him on their board? I think the answer is yes, because he's 22 years old.
Yeah.
He's 6'3", 314. He's got, almost 34-inch arms, 83-inch wingspan. He's the perfect center size. He's a smooth athlete. Gets his footwork's great. He can get to the second level. He's a good run blocker. He's actually a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker right now.
And he's a good pass blocker.
Yeah, and I think that you just kind of maybe he's the guy. The consensus big board over at NFL Mock Draft Database has him at 55 overall right now. So that's within the spectrum of where Seattle's going to be taking a look at guys like this. So I think he would be on their radar anyway. And, the interesting thing about him, I'll just mention this, and I've mentioned Bruce Feldman a lot in this show, and I'm going to mention him one more time. He's on Feldman's freak list again at 6'3", 310 pounds, has a 35-inch vertical, an 8-9-inch broad jump, and a 4.7 shuttle with 32 reps on the bench.
That's an impressive spark score right there.
Yeah,
I mean, that's putting him probably
so more athletic than I thought. And when you take a look at Shane Waldron's kind of scheme at the center position, they may want someone that's athletic like Zion Johnson.
See, I was looking at him, and I know people are saying possibly an elite guard prospect. I don't see that, but he played center for the first time in Mobile. Teams wanted to see him there. He was totally willing to do it. Went in and learned basically how to snap a ball and all of that as a center. Really
I wonder if one of the teams that wanted him to play center at the Senior Bowl was the Seattle Seahawks. Wouldn't that be interesting?
It wouldn't surprise me one bit. I think he is a center at the next level. I think he can be a very good one. I like how he moves in space. The worst case scenario for him, though, is he is a great backup who can play all 5 positions. And I know fans will roll their eyes at that, but there's more value in that than most fans realize, because
he does have the wingspan to be able to play on the outside in a pinch.
Yep. Which in that sense, he's very Ethan Posick like. He can play all 5 positions.
True. Well, let's talk about kind of an Ethan Posick kind of player that reminds me of Ethan Posick, only he plays guard, is Ed Ingram out of LSU, 6'3", 317, good length and wingspan, above average, intelligence, football intelligence, all that kind of stuff. Good feet. Just an interesting prospect. I think he's like a 4th round kind of a guy. Seahawks seem to be pretty set at the interior positions, but you just never know. And then a guy that I really wanted to talk about, Keith, that I'm not exactly sure where the league has this guy graded at, is Abraham Lucas out of Washington State.
It's really weird because like you watch his tape and you're like, okay, this guy can play. And then you look at big boards and whatnot, and you're like, why is he rated as a 5th round pick? And then you start, okay, well, I'm missing something. Let's go look at flaws. And I have a hard time seeing them. And I wonder if what we're running into is
the stereotype of Washington State.
It's a Washington State tackle issue where you look at, Mike Leach was there for most of the time that he was there. And it's just that they weren't taught how to block. And you look at a guy like Dillard, who came out of there a couple of years ago with the Eagles, has really struggled to actually get it, to nail down a starting job, despite the fact that he has the talent, but his technique is so just hit and miss that he just isn't as effective as you'd think he would be. And I wonder if we're seeing that again here, where you basically have that Washington State, Mike Leach effect just hurting his grades.
You know who this guy reminds me of a little bit? It's just weird. I just thought of it. Is Stone Forsythe. We picked up Stone Forsythe last year. He's this like super tall, athletic kind of tackle that's kind of forgotten. Originally, people thought higher of him, but then fell in the draft, ended up going to the Seahawks in like the 6th round or whatever. Abraham Lucas is a good athlete. I think he's a better athlete than Stone Forsythe. This guy, to me, could be the left tackle of the future. Now, if he falls and he's sitting there in the 3rd round for the Seahawks as their left tackle of the future, I'd go get him, especially if you handle the interior defensive lineman position or something in the second round. And this guy's sitting there at 6'7", 332. He's from Everett, Washington originally. He's got 34 and 5/8 arms, 81 and a half inch wingspan, 31 tackles, and 15 sacks as a senior defensive end in high school. He's athletic, is what I'm trying to say. Got great hands, really smart, good balance, all that kind of stuff. I just think that he needs to work on the functional strength stuff, but a lot of tackles do, especially at that size. And he might be a guy that you sit on for a little while. Maybe if you can get Dwayne Brown on a 1-year deal and have this guy in the wings.
But don't you already have him on the roster in Stone Forsythe?
Maybe they don't like Stone Forsythe now that they've had him on the roster for a while, and they never gave him a shot to even take a snap in a game. And
he did.
You know what I mean?
I know.
Nothing significant.
Yeah, he had one game where he played, 14 snaps or something. Whereas Curran got in and got a chance to play for the last
I just think games. Abraham Lucas is a name to watch if you're a Seahawks fan, because I think he's the type of guy that's super athletic in a Shane Waldron system that would be a guy that on their radar. Another guy is Braxton Jones out of Southern Utah, later round guy, 6'7", 306, 36-inch arms, 84 and a 3/8-inch wingspan, but he doesn't have any strength. He needs development time. So
he's a guy,
another guy.
And that was with him is he's a guy who's so big and playing at such a small school that he was able to win just because he was playing against guys that weren't athletes.
Yeah.
And he's so big. His technique isn't great. His functional strength isn't great. He doesn't do a lot other than get in the way. And that's not going to win at the next level. It's not going to be good enough.
No, so but you might view him as a priority free agent. You never know.
He is a project, a good project, a project that would be fun to have, and I would be all over. But he is a project. So you're looking at a 7th round pick type of guy.
Or an undrafted guy.
Do
you have anybody else?
No, I don't.
Because the Senior Bowl really did not have great offensive linemen this year.
No, Trevor Penning was really the guy that I wanted to talk about. I thought he was fun, and everyone else was kind of not fun. And
I'll say this, and it's just like I said about the running backs, Keith. There are a lot of offensive linemen in this draft. Just not at the Senior Bowl. There's a lot of underclassmen that are interesting that we'll talk about in time as we go through some of the position group stuff as we head into the draft, for sure.
Well, a bunch of the top offensive linemen, kind of the Evan Neal group, they didn't even go.
No,
and it was smart of them not to. They didn't need to. Their spot. It's like the Kayvon Thibodeau's and whatnot on the defensive side.
The Ekwanus and the Charles Crosses and all those guys. Yeah.
Those guys' position in
Tyler
the
Linderbaum.
It's there. No one's trying. Well, Linderbaum couldn't. He's out with an injury. But even so, the top offensive lineman didn't go, and that next tier just wasn't as interesting. So. It's just not a great, not a great Senior Bowl list of offensive linemen, which is kind of disappointing for me as the guy who actually likes watching offensive linemen play. So,
well, that's the show. Did you want to add any other notes before we head out of here?
No.
Let me see what we have coming up.
We have a Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. Do you have a prediction, Bill?
I want Cincinnati Bengals to win. I'm not going for the Los Angeles Rams in my own division.
That's not a prediction. That's a desire. You want Cincinnati to win.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 27-21. Well, I'm gonna take that back. 27-13. Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh man,
because the Rams, they scored 3 points in the last Super Bowl they were in. I'll give them another 10.
Yeah, it was with Jared Goff.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Goff's awful.
I just think, we'll see.
Yeah.
The Rams are good. I'll give the Rams credit. They're good. Now they got Akers back. They're a little bit more diversified on offense. There's something special going on in Cincinnati, and I'm going to take the ride.
I'm going to stay with my my thought on Cincinnati. This is not their year. Next year is their year. This was supposed to be a building year for them. They have a ton of cap space and draft capital sitting there waiting for them this offseason. They're going to go from being a team that made the Super Bowl in, kind of an upset fashion and no one expected them to be there, to being a freaking Super Bowl favorite from week 1 next year.
That's true.
Next year is their year. I
especially with Tampa Bay diminishing, or not Tampa Bay, but Kansas City.
Yeah, I've believed that all year. I still see the way they're set up for this offseason to be such a good offseason for them.
Yeah, they are set up well.
They're going to be fun next year. So I want to pick them as my preseason Super Bowl favorite for next year.
I can't even believe you picked the Los Angeles Rams.
But I'm going to take I do you think I like it?
Give me a score. Give me a score. I'm so disappointed right now.
I think it's going to be 31-27.
Cincinnati's scoring more than the Rams in this game.
I hope you're right, because I don't want the Rams to win. I mean, they're division rival. I don't want them to win, but I think they're the better team.
They are the better team. In fact, if you go look at every position group down the line, and you could argue about Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford, I'm going to give Stafford the nod just because he's got the veteran experience. But nope, either quarterback has really any playoff experience.
Burrow is, I don't know. You can go. Burrow is.
But anyway, you go wide receivers. You can maybe say wide receivers, but other than that, tight ends, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, corners, safeties.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles has the better team and a more experienced coach who's maybe better prepared for this moment than he was the last time he showed up.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I mean, on paper, they are the better team.
Yep.
Cincinnati wins.
Go Cincinnati. Go Bengals.
All right.
I don't think they win. I don't think they win, but I want them to.
All right. Everyone out there, all the sign-off stuff, follow us. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.